Today, we're going to look at the most okay gas blowback M4 I have ever seen. Now, you might be asking, what makes it the most okay? Well, I'll tell you. It's the fact that they literally put it right on the handle. So, at least they know what they're selling, but that is nothing when compared to what they put in the manual. Hey people, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to be reviewing more like an initial impressions of the Golden Eagle gas blowback M4. This is the Polymer model, and it is the cheapest gas blowback M4 on the market currently. The list price for this replica on evic.com is only $185. That's really cheap, and it's not even matte protected, so another 15% off brought it down to $155, and anything over $150 is free shipping, so $155 shipped. That is not at all bad for a gas blowback replica. But the question is it worth it? And that's what we're going to be at least looking at in today's video. Before we start the unboxing though, I want to make a quick disclaimer, and that is that this is a first impressions. I have not used this gun in a game yet, and I put only about 1,000 rounds or so through it at targets. So any issues that are going to reveal themselves in the long run have not surfaced yet, and those are going to have to wait to the full review, which will come after 1 or 2 years. So be on the lookout for that. Without further ado, let's get into the unboxing. And I have to say that this is actually really nice packaging for such a budget gun. They elected to not go with, oh no, we ripped it. All right. They elected not to go with the cheap white foam that you normally see in these replicas, and instead went with a nice gray foam. You can see that the manual is here, and as I promised, here is the best slogan of all time. No progress without compromise. Ah, isn't that beautiful? That is amazing. And I've got to say, this is one of the most honest product slogans I've ever seen for an airsoft gun. Bravo, bravo. But I think they're actually being honest with that in the sense that to make such an affordable replica, you have to make compromises. And I think it's reasonable, the compromises that they made. So let's keep going. And of course, this manual is quite cheap. This is definitely one of the compromises. It's obviously just some A4 printing paper with some staples. Very straightforward, but this is probably one of the better airsoft manuals that I've seen. They don't waste time with all of the safety that all of us already know. Obviously, don't shoot your friends without goggles, etc., etc. And, you know, maybe for some new airsoft gun owners, that would be good. But I think that most people already know that, or they're going to ignore it. So we got some of the basic stuff, but this right here to me is the important thing, and that is they actually have parts diagrams for both the magazine and the replica. And this parts diagram for the replica is this model, which is quite cool. You can see the clamshell handguard. So very cool that they did that. Very, very happy with this, and definitely going to hold on to this. Okay, let's get to the gun. And there she be. Not exactly the best looking replica. I mean, this nasty Matrix logo. They've got a little tiny writing, which you probably can't see on the camera, saying Golden Eagle Manufacturing, but what you gonna do? It is what it is. In here, we have a magazine. This is a Golden Eagle magazine, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on. We have a bag of BBs, which I'm just gonna toss those. The jamming rod, and of course the replica itself. The rest of the stuff, let's just go and get this out. Before we actually get rid of the box real fast, I want to mention what's missing. There is no speed loader. Since when does an airsoft gun not come with a speed loader or an adapter for the magazine? So you might need to buy those separately when buying this gun, so keep that in mind. All right. But overall, it does not look that bad. You might have noticed the janky looking orange tip here. Like, what's up with this? They actually have an end cap, which is kind of nice. Now, the question is this BB proof? Which I might have a little clip here showing if it's actually BB proof or not. All right, well, I will find out at the end of the video. So I'm not going to know until then. But kind of cool that they included that. Adjustable stock. Everything here is pretty much as you would expect. Safety works. Semi-automatic, once to fire the gun, it's no longer cocked. You cannot move it into safe. Front and rear sling mounts, kind of what you would expect. Now, we're kind of going to get into really why we're all here. What are the compromises that they talked about in the manual? And why is this gun so okay? So, let's talk about materials. And there's not too much to say here. Primarily what you're looking at right now is plastic and pot metal. And, you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The only part that's noticeably plastic that should be metal is, of course, the receivers, which we already knew that when we bought the gun, being as it's the Polymer model. Most of the other parts that should be metal do appear to be made out of at least an alloy. So that's the barrel, front sights, both sling mounts are metal. The front and rear of the front handguard rings, those are both metal. The carry handle knobs, mag release, bolt catch, fire selector, trigger, charging handle, and bolt, of course, are all made out of metal. Additionally, the buffer tube crown, and buffer tube plate are also metal. As far as I can tell, the only parts that are not made out of metal that you would expect are the upper and lower receiver. If we flip the gun over to the other side, the dust cover, the mag release button, and the forward assist are also made out of metal. And lastly, this rear portion of the carry handle, where the rear sight is also made out of metal. Noticeably, there are some steel parts to this gun, which I was a little bit surprised by. The dust cover is steel, or at the very least, it has iron in it, so it's not a aluminum alloy or zinc alloy. The front and rear pins are both steel. The bolt catch is steel as well. And lastly, the fire control group pins are all steel. I was a little bit surprised by that, as the fire control group itself, being the hammer, trigger, and sear, are not made out of steel. I am very happy that the bolt catch itself is made out of steel, as that's a very important part that is known to wear out on a lot of gas blowbacks. Let's go and pop this open real fast. And on the inside, you can see our hammer right here. The only parts that are steel on here are the silver part here at the back. That is the part that prevents the gun from firing out of battery. Additionally, we can see the bolt catch. The entire bolt catch is made out of steel, as it should be. Obviously, the bolt is some kind of alloy that is not steel, but if we look at this little part right here, this is a separate component that is attached using a Phillips head screw. And this part is the part that will contact the bolt catch, and that is made out of steel. So since you have steel on steel, hopefully the parts will last longer. And if the parts do wear out, you can replace them. Like I said, this is just on with a Phillips head screw, and this can be removed easily to be replaced. So I really like that they did it that way. So hopefully the gun will last longer with cheaper replacement parts. So that's good. Okay, let's go ahead and remove the buffer. And we can see nothing special here. This is a pure cast plastic, or I should say molded plastic buffer. Nothing very special, but I would not replace this. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But it does its job well. So as long as it doesn't break, we're pretty good with it. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about is the stock. The stock is one of the weakest points, in my opinion. It just feels very cheap, very bad. And one of the things I really dislike about it, pushing down on the lever, you can completely remove the stock. It's not supposed to do that. For comparison, I have the same stock, but from a GHK. And you can see it's pretty much an identical clone. There's a few differences here and there, but for the most part, it's the same stock. And just holding down the lever, I cannot put it on. I have to actually pull down on the lever, and then I can push it forward till it locks in place. Now I can move it using the button, but I cannot remove it from the gun. That's important because if you're going to adjust your stock in the middle of a game, you don't want to accidentally pull it off. So kind of weird that they designed it like that, but it's not a huge deal. I think a lot of people are going to be likely to replace their stock for something besides the default to one that they prefer more. But that being said, it's really surprising that such an obvious mistake would be made. So kind of interesting, but is what it is. Okay, so next up, you'll notice that with the stock off, you can actually see that the end cap is a separate piece with screws in the end. Not the hugest issue, there's a screw on the bottom as well, except when you have the stock on, you can still see the screws in the back. It's not a very good look. I'm not a huge fan of that at all. Okay, so it's not the biggest of issues, but there is one significant problem. This gun has proprietary threads. Specifically, the plastic model, I believe, is the one with the proprietary threads for the buffer tube, which means you can't just replace it with whatever buffer tube you want. You're stuck with Western Arms or Golden Eagle buffer tubes. That may be a problem for you, so it's something worth mentioning. All right, so that was a rough overview of all of the externals and internal build quality. Okay, before we start talking about performance, I want to talk about magazines. So this is the magazine that came with the gun. This is the Golden Eagle magazine, and you can see doesn't look hugely different at a distance from the GHK magazine, besides the fact that GHK magazine is gray. Performance-wise, this magazine seems to work fairly well. I was able to empty a full magazine on a single fill, which absolutely essential. There's no reason that any gas blowback replica can't do that in this day and age compared to the competition, right? And this magazine can hold its own. I think it's doing pretty well. But there are a few other things that I'm not a huge fan of with this magazine. Namely, you can see at the front is a different color. It's a different material, or at the very least, a different finish. I'm not sure why they did that. Also, if you can see, they have several pins running up and down it. There's a pin in the rear. There is a pin in the back here. Not a huge fan of those pins. They kind of just ruin the look as far as I'm concerned. Not really an issue. If you're fine with it, if it doesn't bother you, just go with it. Plus, these mags, to my knowledge, are substantially cheaper. The last thing you may have noticed is that even though the magazine from the Golden Eagle does have the roller delay kind of wheel thing going on here, this gun works perfectly fine with the GHK ones. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure if they just left this on here for no reason. Who knows? Worthy of note, the GHK magazines are not 100% compatible due to the gas router and the nozzle. I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail later, but just keep in mind they will work, but you won't have as good of gas efficiency. The fill valve is in the middle of the rear. I'm not a huge fan of that. That's another complaint I have about it. I like it being up here, or at the very least on the bottom, where it's less visible and I don't have to look at it so much. Kind of a strange thing there. The last thing to mention here is the fact that you'll notice, or it might be a little hard to see, but the stem on the GHK magazine is slightly longer on the output valve. This causes an issue because the knocker inside of the gun is extended slightly into the mag well when the hammer is down. That means that if you insert the magazine with the hammer down, the gun will fire. That's not a good thing. And that's one of the reasons I haven't fielded yet. I feel perfectly safe for myself using it. I don't feel like I would make that mistake knowing that it's going to do that. But do I really want to risk it? I just don't really feel comfortable taking a gun that I know has a serious safety issue. What I'm considering doing at this point is I'm probably going to file down the knocker, or I'm going to replace it with a GHK one. Just depends on what I feel like doing at that point in time. Okay, last thing worth mentioning with these two mags, the GHK one, as you might expect, is steel, whereas the Golden Eagle one is just made out of some kind of alloy. But the pins are steel, as you would expect. Take that as you will. It's not really a big issue, and of course one benefit of having a non-iron based material is that it won't rust. So that is a pro in and of itself. That's one thing I've always liked about plastics versus like AK steel, but it's a personal preference thing, and if it matters to you, it does. So okay, so now we can move on to performance. FPS wise, it's not super consistent. With 0.28 gram BBs, we're looking at about 310, 315 FPS. That was about 1.3 joules. With 0.2 gram BBs, that jumps up to about 370, 380 FPS, and about 1.3 joules still. So surprisingly, did not really increase the joule output. That doesn't really bother me, but what does bother me is the consistency between shots. the Hopup is hot garbage in this gun. And that's unfortunately due to bad luck for me, because there's actually two versions of this replica. There is the new version that just came out a couple years ago, and there's the old version. So there's a lot of old stock just floating around, and I was unfortunate enough to get one of those. If you notice the horrendously ugly orange piston, that is one of the obvious signifiers that this is one of the older versions. To my knowledge, there are no new version replicas with the orange piston. I may be wrong on that one, but that's to my knowledge. The reason that this is significant is the older versions have the Western Arms Hopup and nozzle. The newer versions use the GHK Hopup and nozzle, which are significantly better. And with the Western Arms, you can't just upgrade the bucking because it's a proprietary bucking and Hopup unit. So you have to replace both, and probably the barrel too. So you're looking at another $80 to $100 or maybe even $120 to get into good shape, plus a new nozzle. That's a pretty high price to pay for a $150 gun. But to me, that's not the biggest issue, because even with my more expensive replicas like the GHK M4, which is a $500 replica, at least at the time I bought it, I think, I had to replace the stock Hopup within just a few games. It might have even been the first day that I was playing with the GHK M4. It broke the Hopup and I had to buy a new one. So buying a more expensive replica is not necessarily going to save you from having to buy a new Hopup unit. So that's not the biggest issue to me. It is a real pain, and it's bad enough. The stock Hopup's so bad. That's one of the reasons I haven't fielded it yet. It's at 60 yards, you cannot hit your target. You'll be lucky if one of your BBs goes straight for that far. So to me, that's a huge deal breaker. Additionally, I would have preferred to have the GHK nozzle because, like I said, I prefer to use the GHK magazine. So having the GHK nozzle would have made the gun more gas efficient with these nozzles and probably even given me better consistency. That being said, if you're okay using the original magazine, this may not matter so much to you. And really, that's all I have to say about it. The recoil feels good. It's not the most heavy recoil I have ever felt, but it's perfectly adequate, and it feels good and smooth. It doesn't feel gritty like some gas blowbacks I've shot. It feels very smooth, and I think that's because you don't have metal on metal contact. You have metal on plastic, which just comes off much more smoothly. And that kind of leads me into another point, and the reason I mentioned I would not upgrade the buffer, or really the stock for that matter, I really would not touch the internals of this gun without having to, because my initial guess, being that I haven't had the gun for that long, is that this is a pretty finely tuned system. There's just the right amount of recoil that's not going to destroy the gun. It's not going to destroy the plastic from shooting it. If you put a heavyweight buffer or heavyweight bolt in there, you may totally destroy the balance, and it's really going to place a lot of wear on these weak parts. And that's one of the reasons I originally put off buying this gun for so long. The plastic receiver, even for $155, I have experienced the GHK G5, and that gun, $300, and it breaks the receiver routinely. There's this, you can do preventative measures, but ultimately it's just a horrible, horrible design. They should not have released it in that state. That's just the way things are. So I kind of thought that this gun would do the same, but there are a couple factors that are going for this guy that the GHK G5 does not have. One, the replacement receivers for this are $20 for both the upper and lower receiver. That is fantastic. $20. If it lasts for like 2 or 3 years, I don't think that's bad at all. If you're in the gas blowback industry, you know it is expensive. Gas blowback replicas are insane. And to me, $20 is nothing compared to the price of most of these guns. It's going to take you several replacement receivers to get up to the price of the premium replicas. Additionally, if you want to upgrade to a metal receiver, they're only $60 or was it $80? That's not too bad at all. I think that's actually a really good price. So if you get this gun and you decide that, yes, I want to stick with gas blowback replicas, you can invest more money and upgrade your replica. So I think that's fantastic. Okay, and then the third thing that this replica has going for it over the GHK G5, as far as the durability, or at the very least, the economy of keeping the gun running, it has a large buffer and a large buffer spring. With that big plastic buffer in there. I think that all of these will work together to reduce the amount of recoil, the amount of force, the amount of stress that the receiver has to take. The part that's containing the reciprocating part is made out of metal. Whether it be just weak metal, pot metal, or whatever it is still metal. And hopefully that long travel, that large amount of material and that plastic buffer will help to make the receiver last longer. So that's what I'm hoping. Only time can tell, and we'll just have to see in a year or two when I come back for the full review, what do I think then. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to keep playing around with this gun. I'm hopefully going to have some upgrade parts, and I'm going to be replacing the Hopup unit in the near future. May have a video on that. If you have absolutely any questions whatsoever about this replica, about gas blowbacks, or anything gas blowback related, just let me know down in the comments below. I love answering your guys' questions and talking to you guys, so let me know what you guys think. And until the next video, stay safe, guys.